Victor Biden. Oh. Victor Biden.
So I'm like, yes.
Yeah, like I said, I'll be here now. And I'd like to see.
I've heard them say that. There must be something. My mom is something like that.
They'll be coming out.
Same
She
thing.
has been out a little bit earlier.
Like she likes to do it. Going down.
Oh, that's good rest. Bible study for life. They have good rest.
You haven't said anything. Oh, I don't know where to go. Have fun somewhere.
Oh, I see that.
Kind of down now. We're down there.
Thank you.
Keep going. Start, have a turn. Keep going.
Morning, lady. How are y'all doing? Good. You have a good week? Yes. Good.
Gosh, we get so much stuff now.
Planning on a better one, right? Yeah, there you go.
And I look at that and says the Bible that's terrible. I said,
Second
I
page,
believe
two.
How are you?
they might expect nothing.
Finish that, Brad.
I separate out.
Oh.
Find me one. Get it? They come back there now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's actually a burden.
Yes, and like I try not to let it, even some weeks it will pile up on my bed. Look like
And then something, and it falls over and it just kind of spreads because it's all slick.
right?
And that's, I touch it.
Maybe I'm thinking there's something there.
So kind of the motivation underlying driving.
And he was one of those that kept us. So I always figured early.
That's interesting because our study this morning was on Cain and Abel.
Right, well, and that just meant he was punchy and shit, and he wanted to make sure he knew where stuff was.
I don't even,
Yeah.
I'll just walk around over
How are you, David? Good, good.
Hey, John, how are you?
Good. How's your little boy?
He is good.
Yeah?
Boy, he's 35 and headed back to Colorado. I told him it's 56 there today. He's like, gosh, thank goodness.
You doing him what?
It's 56 in Lakewood today. He's tired of the heat. He's like, I told him tomorrow's gonna be 72. So,
Wow.
but, yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't, I mean, they don't have 100-degree days up there ever.
Very rarely. It has been a hotter summer for him.
Has it?
The last 2 years. He like added an air conditioning unit into his bedroom because he's upstairs and it's just.
Oh, it gets hot.
Sleepy.
I only had the two little boys this week. Yeah. There was not a lot of activity in our lesson. There was just not a lot of pronouns to do.
Well, you could have had role play. One could be Cain
No,
and Abel.
no, that's not good.
No.
And then switch.
No. Probably not good. But,
Hit each other. Well, we've got two grandsons and we just kind of like family there. All right, fight, hit each other. Come on, go ahead.
have at it. Get it out of your system.
John's like, no.
I'm like, Cain and Abel.
Oh, he's the one that's
3 minutes and 40 seconds.
We can let her teach her that way. I'm glad that for our still turned out good and it's done. Yeah. I wondered about that. If it was hard for him to see things.
my boss, and he ended up taking his stuff. I didn't want to put that on my video.
Everybody's like, we love her. She was in line. She's a great actor. She loved her, but she didn't speak. One of the teachers at college, she already said something. In Mason. Right, when she got on a roll. That's what I keep on like for my mom. In a small way that I think that there's so much more than more of it is a relief, that's the word. To just say, guess what? I don't have to have this, and it should keep going. I think she would get more relief to get rid of stuff. So,
finally give her some.
that's a good thing. Go. I know.
6 hours later.
We can clean everything up, especially if we're gonna have company. And so they, oh my gosh, it was so great. But then I find that we keep going along.
Good morning.
Things start building up on the so it's like that's our
How are y'all? Pardon? I'll have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. I'm sure they'll like.
Eric was here.
They'll shoot me up.
So I think it's my I always take your
Always is.
seeing what that first.
So excited. There's crack.
Or it's okay, we're really good today. Getting good on that.
So I'm
Yeah, I saw Dave, I didn't know something.
switch over to 70.
Really? Not that I've noticed, but. Best word. I noticed if I'm up there singing.
Bring your pain that you've been hiding. Bring your scars and bring your shame. Every failure, every secret.
He is the faithful God, keeping his covenant of love to 1,000 generations of those who love him and keep his commands. God's love is enough for us. His love always comes through. His love always is faithful. He shows up. His love is something we can count on and depend on. It never stops, never gives up. It chases us down wherever we go. Let's continue to worship this morning and sing about that great love of God.
For I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. constant in the trial and the change. This one remains. This one remains. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love. In death, in life, I'm confident and covered by the blood of your great love. My debt is paid. There's nothing that can separate my heart from your great love. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. And on and on and on and on it goes. Yes, it overwhelms and satisfies my soul. And I'll never ever have to be afraid, 'cause this one thing remains. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love.
You can go ahead and have a seat. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Romans 8:38 and 39 says, "For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord." Such a great promise. Nothing can ever separate us from the love of Jesus. That as reckless love saying, it comes after us, it chases us down. That's such an important thing to remember, that God loves us like this. So important to remember when we talk about what we're going to talk about today, which is the giant of failure. Because I don't know if you know this, but everyone fails. I just want to put that out there. That's just the truth. We all fail. The Bible is full of people who failed. Noah gets off the ark and starts back into life and ends up getting drunk and passed out in his tent after the flood. Not exactly the most flattering chapter in the Bible. Abraham's got a few. He starts telling people that Sarah, his wife, is his sister. Not once, but twice. Right? It becomes a generational sin too, because Isaac does the same thing with Rebekah. And, well, as weird as this is, for Isaac it was a complete lie. For Abraham, it's kind of true. It's his half-sister. It's just creepy and weird to think about, by the way. Just saying. He does all that with Sarah. That doesn't even mention that that whole Hagar-Ishmael plan that goes so beautifully well for Abraham and Sarah. Moses' first attempt to free the people of Israel is to kill an Egyptian, and then he runs away for 40 years. When God calls him back, he makes lots of excuses. Even after God's brought the people out and done all these incredible things, Moses still disobeys God and strikes the rock for water and ends up not going to the promised land himself. I love the book of Judges and Samson. Samson, it would take less time to talk about Samson's successes than it would to talk about his failures, right? Talk about a guide how not to date. Just read the story of Samson. Okay, that's it. David, never heard of Bathsheba? Not exactly a shining moment. Peter, cutting off people's ears, denying he even knows Jesus. Thomas, stubbornly doubting even when the other disciples tell him that Jesus is back. The Bible is full of people who fall short, who don't always get it right. And we're exactly the same way. And I don't know about you, but I don't like failing. In fact, I don't think any of us like failing. And we're not made to like failure. We're made in the image of God, right? God's perfect, which means this is the image, this is the standard we're always trying to live up to on the inside. There's a part of us that always knows that this life and the way I'm living, this is not what I'm made for. I'm made to be like something else. And we have this perfect image ingrained in us, even if we don't know what it is. When I was a kid, anytime I messed up, anytime I did something, I would get so mad at my parents. I cannot tell you how many times we had the same argument where I would tell them, you guys just expect me to be perfect. And they would try to hold in their laughter because it was not them that was putting this perfect standard on me. It was me. I wanted that. And when I didn't measure up to it, I usually took it out on them pretty well. We fail, we mess up. In the book of Leviticus, which is what we're reading this week, by the way, in our year through the Bible, just giving that a little plug. Leviticus over and over uses the phrase, be holy for I am holy. And that's the same thing God is telling us, that I'm perfect and I want you to be like me. But sometimes we make the mistake when we read things like Leviticus and the law, that this is not about setting some impossible standard by God. The reason he tells us those things, the reason he says this, is he's showing us how to deal with it when we don't measure up. He's showing us how to handle our failure because he knows that we're going to do it. And as followers of Jesus, yes, there will be a day when we finally reach perfection. It's called heaven, and you have to leave this life to get there. And that's why Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13, verse 12, for now we only see a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part. Then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. What he's saying is, I don't know all of it. I can't do all of it right because it's only partial right now. It's not all the way there. Someday it'll be fully there. Someday I'll be with God and I'll get to completely know it. But I love the last part of the verse. He says, even as I am fully known. He's acknowledging that I don't fully know God yet. I'm not fully there. I can't be perfect. I still mess up. I still fail. But God knows me completely and totally. And that's the second important thing we need to understand. Yes, we all fail, but God knows that. And we cannot fail so badly that God doesn't love you. In other words, failure isn't fatal. It's not fatal. It's not the end of us. Just because we fail, we're not done for. And that's where the giant of failure comes in. And he starts whispering. He starts taunting. He starts telling us, hey, see how you messed up? I don't think God's going to want you anymore. You messed up way too bad. You've blown it. God's done with you. In fact, he even starts harping on us like, ooh, are you going to try that? Because you might mess up. I don't think you can do that. You might fail at that. And then what's going to happen between you and God? Is God still going to love you if you mess that up? And he builds this fear in us that we are so scared to fail, that we're so scared to mess up. Folks, our failures do not disqualify us from being with God. If they did, there'd be nobody to read about in the Bible except for Jesus. Right? If he just cut out everyone that ever failed, it'd just be Jesus talking to himself, which technically is Jesus an only child, by the way, and he's an only begotten son. Does that mean, so he's allowed to talk to himself a little bit. That's what only children do. We don't have anyone else to talk to. Right? But there'd be nobody left. It'd just be Jesus, but it's not. He uses all these people and he relates to all these people and has relationships because failure isn't fatal. Now turn over to 2 Corinthians chapter 4. Because Paul has some important stuff for us to see about what it means for us to fail. Because, as I already said, we all fail. We need to get past that. We need to get past this. All right, I'm never going to fail. That doesn't mean we don't try to succeed. That doesn't mean we just give up. We keep trying. But in the midst of that, we learn to deal with our failure and not let failure have have control over us. Not let the fear of failure control us and stop us from doing the things and stop us from following Jesus. In 1 Corinthians 4, starting in verse 7, he says, we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. Yeah, some of you need to stop singing Trade My Sorrows in your head right now. We can keep going. It just happens every time we read numbers, right? Here's the thing. We're the jars of clay that it talks about. He talks about we have this treasure in jars of clay. We're the jars of clay. We're these fragile, breakable things. And yet what he is saying is because of the way that God works in you, you might be frail, you might be fragile, you might be breakable, but God is going to sustain you. God is going to take care of you. Your failures are not fatal. He says we are hard-pressed, but not crushed. Right? Life is not perfect. It is stressful. It is difficult at times. It presses in on us from all sides. Sometimes that's just due to life. Sometimes that's due to our failures. But through it all, because of Jesus, we aren't crushed. Even when those difficult times come, those things happen, we are not crushed. We are not done for. We are perplexed, but not in despair. If you want to know what despair looks like, just come to my house during distance learning when the internet goes out, and you will see the face of despair, okay? It's not working. I can't get in my Zoom meeting. It's okay. It'll be all right. Just calm down. And that's what the kids have to say to me, because I'm the one with despair. No. Right? But we're perplexed, we're confused, we're lost, we don't always know exactly what to do, but we don't have to despair because we have someone who does know, who isn't lost, who knows exactly where he is and knows exactly where we need to be, that we can just trust him. We don't have to worry about being lost and get despaired over it. We are persecuted but not forsaken. This one is really much more about that giant that whispers to us, that tells us stuff. That's going, yeah, see how these people are treating you? See how things aren't going right in your life? That's because you messed up and God doesn't love you anymore. He says those things to us. He taunts us with those things. And yet here's Paul reminding us, hey, even those times when it seems like people are against you, you are not forsaken. You are not alone. Jesus went through these exact same things. You're not alone. It says we are struck down but not destroyed. We took on something. We took on that giant maybe. We went into something that God told us to do. And we walked in and we got struck down. We lost. We failed. But we were not destroyed. Because of Jesus and his power in us, that's not the end of our story. That's not the end of it. We might be struck down, but we are not destroyed. Failure isn't fatal. It's not the end of me. In fact, God can use my failure to do some incredible things. Jump ahead to verse 15 there in 2 Corinthians 4. It says, all this is for your benefit, so that the grace that is reaching more and more people may cause thanksgiving to overflow to the glory of God. Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, and inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. God can use our failure. In verse 15 there, he talked about this grace that is reaching more and more people may cause thanksgiving overflow to the glory of God. When people see the grace of God displayed in our lives, they'll go, wow, that brings God's glory. That brings him glory for people to see him display his grace in our lives. You know the only way that God gets to display grace in our lives? When we mess up, when we fail. The only way to be an example of grace is for people to know that you failed and God still loved you. He showed you grace. We sing the phrase, the song Amazing Grace all the time. I heard this great line saying, grace is not amazing for someone who thinks they're perfect. Why would grace be amazing? If I'm perfect and I never do anything wrong and I never have any problems and I never need grace, is it really that great? Why do I need this? Amazing grace is only amazing for people who understand that they're a wretch like me. For people who understand that they have failed. And see, when we start to think that way, when we start to view our lives that way and see our failures that way, we don't have to be so scared of them. They're not such a big deal. Okay, yeah, I messed up. I don't want to do that again. I don't like failing. We're still not made to enjoy it. Doesn't mean we just keep doing it. Oh, well, God gets show off his grace. I'll just keep being stupid. That's not what he's saying. Paul is very clear that even though grace abounds as much as sin, that is not an excuse to go on sinning and go on doing things. That we miss the point when we do that. But it's not the nail in the coffin for us when we mess up. When failure comes and we don't do it all right, we can still turn to God. He gives us his grace. He gives us his love. In the midst of that, he gets to show off how incredible he is. That's why Paul talks about boasting in his weakness and in his failure. It's not because he's like, oh yeah, look how bad I messed up. Isn't it great? No. It's like those are the moments where Jesus gets to show off in my life in a different way. See, anytime we are faced with an opportunity, God gives us some opportunity, brings something and says, all right, here's what I want you to do. There's 3 possible outcomes. Right? We could do it and succeed, and it works out. Awesome. God gets the glory. He did this cool thing. He brought me to this path. God did this awesome thing. We could go and try it and fail. And then God shows me grace, and he loves me through the midst of that failure, and God gets the glory for that. Or I could not try. And then the giant of failure wins, and God gets no glory. When Peter gets out of the boat, right? Jesus tells him to walk on water, and Peter starts coming out to Jesus and then falls in the water, right? Jesus got glory because Peter walked out. As soon as he's walking in the water, it's like, wow, because he's following Jesus and he has his eyes fixed on Jesus, it's amazing. Jesus gets the glory. When Peter falls in the water and cries out, help me, Lord, and Jesus pulls him out of the water, puts him back in the boat, guess what? Jesus gets the glory for showing him grace and pulling him out of the water. The only way Jesus doesn't get glory from that situation is if Peter stays in the boat and doesn't even try. We cannot be controlled or consumed by the idea that we might fail. And yet so many times we are. We get so scared to even try something because we're like, what if I don't do it right? What if I mess it up? God says, how many other things have you already messed up and I've shown you grace and I still love you? You cannot screw up so badly that I'm going to stop loving you. And so it's going to be okay. I will see you through this just like I saw you through all the other ones. That's why Paul says what he says there in verse 16. Therefore, we do not lose heart. God can be glorified when I succeed. God can be glorified when I fail because of his grace and love for me. And so I do not have to lose heart. I can keep trying and keep following him. It says, though outwardly we're wasting away, yet inwardly we're being renewed day by day. On the outside, sometimes it just looks like, man, I'm just screwing up. I'm wasting away. I cannot get this right. And yet inwardly, God can even take those failures. Not only can he use them for his glory, he can start to teach us and prepare us for things that are coming. There's actually benefits for us sometimes to failing. Believe it or not, God can use those failures to grow us and to do things. Sometimes it means that we have to fail now so that we can succeed later. We have to learn from it and grow from it, you know. As DC Talk said, sometimes we have to learn the hard way. There's no other way for us to understand that we have completely messed up until we're staring in the face, till we hit rock bottom, so to speak. Sometimes we have to fail so the next time we don't do those same things. So the next time that kind of situation comes up, we've learned from it and God's shown us, hey, you failed back here, but it wasn't fatal. You weren't destroyed. And now I've brought you back to it. And we get to do this again. You can walk with me through this. I've shown you. I've taught you. Now you can learn from it. In 2001, Patriots won the Super Bowl, right? Which for some of you who are under the age of 20 just sounds like, well, yeah, big deal. That happens all the time. Yeah, that was the first time. That was when they were the team that was never supposed to win. And when we were actually all cheering for them, not against them. Sorry, Patriots fans, if you're out there, right? It was incredible. They beat the Rams, right? The greatest show on turf was the nickname of the Rams team, right? That crazy offense. One of the keys to the fact that the Patriots beat them was the fact that they played each other a few weeks before that in the regular season. And guess who won the first time? Not the Patriots. They lost to the Rams. But they learned some things, they saw some things, and so when they played them again, they were able to have success. Ironically, 6 years later, New York Giants play an undefeated New England Patriots in the Super Bowl. Had this huge upset. What was the key to that game? Part of it was that in week 17, the very last regular season game, the Patriots beat the Giants and then they played again. God does that same thing in our lives sometimes. That we face something and, oh man, we failed at this. All right, God's going to bring us back. He's going to show us grace, give us another chance. We're going to try this again. And we can learn from that first time so we don't make the same mistakes the second time. After the battle of of Jericho, this great success by Joshua and the people, right? Then they go on to the next battle and they try and do it themselves and they lose. They find out that one of the members of their family, the nation, had sinned and kept stuff that wasn't supposed to be kept, and God had not gone with them. They had been like, oh, well, we won this time, so we can go do it again. You know what? They didn't do that again. They lost that battle. Joshua does not go again until God tells him to go and tells him how to attack those enemies. They didn't make that same mistake again. God wants to do the same thing with you and I. Sometimes we have to fail in lesser things so we can succeed in greater things. He talks about our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us eternal glory that far outweighs them all. He's talking about these lesser things sometimes, these light, these momentary things. You might fail in some of these things, but God's going to teach us and grow so that we can learn something greater, something bigger. The worst academic semester of my life, I got a 1.75 GPA in college, right? This is how many questions I answered on my calculus final. This is how much I wrote down on my test before I handed it in. Nothing. Blank sheet of paper, right? Well, I had the questions on it. I just looked over for 10 minutes, went, I don't know what any of this says. I might as well be reading Greek. And turned it back in. I got an A in racquetball, though, okay? It was all right. Important things, right? One horrible failed semester, right? Which should just be like the end, and it wasn't just my GPA, it wasn't just school. Like, there were a lot of things that just fell apart that semester. It should have been the worst semester ever by some of these standards. And yet, looking back, it was one of the best semesters I had in college because I learned so much about the love and grace of Jesus in the midst of that. I had spent most of my life having pretty good success at things like school and stuff like that. I hadn't really felt the need for God's grace in the way that I did that semester. That it took me failing pretty much utterly, totally, and completely at almost everything. And God in the midst of that saying, I still love you. You're still mine. I'm still here. You didn't chase me off. Sometimes God lets us fail in some of those lesser things so that we can see His love for us and we can learn to succeed in those greater things. Look, I'm not here as your pastor without that semester. Because that semester led to me going into ministry at all. God used those failures to bring about something greater. Sometimes we have to fail outwardly to succeed inwardly. That semester, I could show you my GPA. Here's the outward signs of my success. They're not very big. Don't look at them, please. I couldn't show you, though, the intangible things, the things that God had taught me. I didn't have any way to just lift those up and show them to you. Like, I could talk about them, I could try. But describing those things that happened inside of me that semester, it's hard to describe. I couldn't show you something tangible about what God taught me, but He taught me so very much that semester. Sometimes we have to fail in temporary things to succeed in eternal things. So He says we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. The temporary things, we fail at sometimes. God says, all right, that's those lesser things. That's something that's not going to last for very long. So I want you to succeed in those eternal things. And we talk about Peter falling in the water. He has this moment of failure. He has some other ones where he's trying to defend Jesus in the wrong way when they come to arrest him and he misses the point. And later he denies even knowing Jesus. But Jesus restores him. Jesus brings him back. Before all that, Jesus already said, you're Peter. You're the rock. Literally, he renames him rock. Right? Cephas, Peter. You're the rock. You're going to be the leader of the church that I'm going to build. This family that I'm going to start. I'm going to make you the leader of that. What's amazing is that if you read 1 Peter and 2 Peter, the closing of both those letters, Peter talks about grace. The grace of God. And he asks them to remember, may the grace of God grow more and more in your lives. Because Peter understood the grace of God. Yeah, he messed up in some temporary ways, but it helped him succeed in these eternal ways, that he started to get a better picture of what the grace and love of God really looks like. We need to remember those things. When we fail and the giant starts talking to us, that you're not good enough, you'll never be good enough, God doesn't love you, you've messed up too many times, He's done with you. It's not true. Yes, we all fail. But yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, in the midst of my failure, Jesus came to rescue me. Yes, He will use those very failures to show off His glory, to show off how incredible He is and to grow me and become the person I need to be. He takes those broken things and he puts them back together and he makes something amazing happen. Time and time again, that's what we see God doing in his word. That God doesn't take perfect, well put together people and do incredible things with them. He takes broken, messy people. But, we started reading through the Bible, right? And I forget who said it the other night. We were talking about Genesis. I think it was Gina. Man, there's really some R-rated stuff in this book, and these are some messy people. They're messy. Just read just Genesis. You don't even have to go through the rest to start seeing how incredibly messy and dysfunctional and broken people are. I mean, in Genesis, it gets so bad that God has to wipe them all out except for Noah and his family. And even after that, it just gets messy again. And yet, we are the ones that God chooses to use. We are the one that God chooses to work through. Because when we fail, it's not the end of our story. It doesn't have to be. Our failure led Jesus to the cross. And in that moment when the enemy thinks that Jesus has failed, they killed him. He didn't do what he came to do. No, that's exactly what he came to do. What looked like failure turned out to be exactly the plan that God had all along. It turned out to be exactly the thing that means that when we fail, we're not done for. We're not crushed. We're not destroyed. It's not over. Our God is bigger than that giant. That giant of failure that's whispering in our ear all the time, trying to tell us those things. God says, he's lying to you. What he says is not true. Listen to me. That nothing separates you from my love. Not your successes, not your failures. Nothing separates us from the love of God. Let's pray. Father, thank you that even when we mess up, even when we fall short, that you're not done with us. That you gently call us back and you show us your grace and you make us right with you again. You call us back and you help us to learn from those things. And that even in the midst of our failures, you get to show off how incredible you are. You don't only use us when we do everything right. You get to use us even when we mess up. You can show off how incredible you are in our lives. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for showing us that grace, that mercy, that forgiveness. Help us to not be controlled by the fear of failure. Help us not be controlled behind trying to hold those things in and hide those things from everyone else, because those aren't things to be ashamed of. Those are things that show how amazing you are. Even though I'm broken, even though I'm messed up, you love me and you want me to be a part of your family. That you make me right. You make me whole. Thank you for that. I ask all this in your name. Amen. Those jars of clay that fail, that mess up, they become broken vessels sometimes. And God loves to take those broken vessels and put them back together and keep us from being destroyed and use us. That's what this song we're about to sing talks about. It talks about how we're broken vessels, but by his amazing grace, he puts us back together and uses us for his glory. Stand and sing with us.
All these pieces, broken and scattered, in mercy gathered, mended and take our failure, you take our weakness, you set your treasure in jars of clay. So take this heart, Lord, I'll be your vessel, the world to see your work in me. Oh, amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Oh, I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see. Oh, I can see you now. Oh, I can see the love in your eyes. Laying yourself down, raising up the broken to life. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Oh, I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see. Oh, I can see you now. Oh, I can see the love in your eyes. Laying yourself down, raising up the broken to life. Oh, I can see you now. Oh, I can see the love in your eyes. Laying yourself down, raising up the broken to
When Jesus meets the woman at the well, she's a story of broken. She's a broken vessel. And yet, after she meets Jesus, she sees the love in his eyes, and she goes back and tells her whole town, hey, I met this man. He told me all this stuff about me. Her story of failure became Jesus' story of grace. And the same thing is true for you and I. Our stories of failure can become his story of grace. That's what he wants to do with us. Hope you grabbed a bulletin. There's a few announcements. Continuing our study through the Bible, this week we're reading through Leviticus. So love to have you join us tomorrow night. It's Monday night, 6 o'clock right here. And then all week long on Facebook, YouTube, Family Together podcast, all those places you can hear some devotionals and stuff to keep you going. Because some of these, all right, I know some of you are already thinking, oh, Leviticus. I really don't want to read through Leviticus was my favorite so far. Okay, God's like messing with me because all right, Genesis. I can read about Noah and Abraham, and even Exodus. You get the plagues, and even I was a little bit like, all right, Leviticus, I can do this. And man, God's every bit in those scriptures as much as in everything else. And it was really cool. So hopefully you'll join us this week as we read through Leviticus. Wednesday nights, movie parables. We're starting Hunger Games this week. So Wednesday at 5:30. Love to have you join us. Be about 4 weeks of those. Our adopt a teacher stuff is still there in the back. If you'd like, this is the last week, if you'd like to pick a teacher and make a basket for, because we want to have those back in by next week, if possible, so we can get them out by the following week. Even if you aren't up to fill in a basket or whatever, but we would love for someone to pick all of our teachers just to pray for them. So even if you're like, I can't right now, or I'm just not able to, or I don't know how to do that at all, because I don't know how to do that at all, that's why I have Joni. But we're mostly, the most important thing, we want all our teachers to be prayed for. So to be able to tell them that, hey, somebody prays for you every day. That every time they walk over to the refrigerator, they see your name on there, lift you up to God. That we want to encourage them that way. So even if you can't, grab one of those names from back there and be praying for those teachers. 2 weeks from today, we'll have a family meeting on the 11th of October. Nothing big. It's our annual, all the meetings are coming up and we have to officially like messenger stuff. So, but have to let you know 2 weeks in advance. So 2 weeks from now, we'll have a brief meeting when we finish up service. And as always, if we get somebody to help wipe down pews and stuff when we're done, that would be great. I think that's it. Any other announcements should be in your bulletins, unless I forgot something, which no one's looking at me like, with a panic look, so I think we're good. So I think that's it. Thank you guys for being here and worshiping with us today. It's always good to be together and get to worship together. So Dave, would you mind praying? Dismiss us this morning.
Our gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, I just, again, I repeat that thank what Annie just said about being able to gather together and worship you and encourage one another, and especially in these times where we're struggling for a new normal. And just, thank you for Calvary Baptist and our pastor and his family and all they do for us. We just pray for those that aren't able to be here with us this morning. And, hopefully they were able to join us online or they're traveling.